Hey there, Ferenc. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I had a few minutes on my lunch break, so I just wanted to show you a couple of things in Ableton because I realized that using a combination of groups and then submix buses might actually be easier for you if you're trying to work on drums. I don't have any audio in here. I just set up these tracks in the mixer to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. But let's assume you had two kick drum mics, two snare drum mics, and then for simplicity now we've got overhead left and overhead right. The way that I would approach this is to take these two kick drum channels, and if I go up to edit and then group tracks, or Command G is the shortcut, it will automatically put them in this nifty little foldable sort of a group there. Now the only problem with this is that you cannot take a group and nest it inside of another group. It's not possible to do two tiers deep in the group there. So we're fine for the snares. We can group those together, and I'm going to go ahead and call that snare submix, and I'll call this one the kick submix. We can do the same thing with the overhead left and right. Command G is a great shortcut. Use it all the time. And we'll use it in just a moment with the plugins also to create an audio effect rack for parallel compression. So this is my overhead submix. Now we've got these three submixes here: the kick, which has the kick in and the kick out; the snare, which has got the top and the bottom; and then the left and right panned channels going into the overhead submix. So for simplicity, I'm just going to collapse this real quick. And then the key to getting all of this on a single fader is to create a new track. And like I had mentioned in the post, you want to set that to no input. There are a couple of different choices here, but if you set it to the default, if you leave it on external input, ultimately you're going to end up in an input monitor situation on this track, and if you have something plugged into your interface, it can all of a sudden start ringing out or going crazy if you've got a mic there. So it's just a good habit to get into, to put that on no input. The key with these submix channels is to route the kick, snare, and overhead group submixes to the, I'm just going to call this drums submix. You want to route, and you'll see here my monitor selections went away. I don't have any options because there's nothing routed to this track, nor is it assigned to any input. But if I route the, or actually you're in England, right? If I route the kick submix group to the drums submix, all of a sudden you can see it light up orange, just like Gennaro said, and I get the choice to input, auto, or off. Now obviously we're interested in input monitor here because we want to hear whatever's going into that bus right there. So I'll repeat the same treatment for the snare and the overheads. So what we've got now is a routing configuration that will respect soloing of individual tracks within a submix. It will also respect soloing of groups within the submix. So we'll get, if we solo here, we'll get both of these kicks. If we solo here, we'll get just the kick in, and it will still route correctly through the drums submix bus. Now I had mentioned something about using audio effects racks for parallel compression, and I think it's a really great technique. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a 1176 here, the CLA 76. And the easiest way to set up parallel compression in line is to simply highlight the plugin instance, and again we want to use the group command. This will automatically place the plugin within an audio effect rack on its own individual chain. Now each chain in Ableton nomenclature is one or more effects, or none at all, but it's a different path through the effects rack. So if I right click and choose create chain, I've now got a chain here with the compressor on it, and I've also got a chain with nothing on it, which is my dry chain. So typically I will name these comp and dry, and you can use the level here, the rack mixer they call it, to blend the compressed signal with the dry signal for classic parallel compression. Now the great part is, on the output of the effect rack, those two channels, the comp and the dry, are mixed down back to a stereo pair, and then from there I can take and put an EQ on the combined submix of the compressed and the dry channel. So we've got all sorts of layers going here. We've got individual kick drum channels going into a kick group. The group is then feeding into the submix, and the submix itself has parallel compression with it, and then goes through the EQ there. The effect rack is great for all sorts of things too. I use it on vocals all the time. In fact, one of the things I've just been experimenting lately with on vocals is rather than a comp and a dry channel, I like to use an LA2A followed by an 1176, or sometimes vice versa, but that's a pretty classic serial compression chain for vocals. Using an effect rack, you can put an LA2A in parallel with the 76, and then also, if you want to, some dry signal. That allows you to dig in a little bit deeper with the LA2A and the 1176 respectively than you might want to do when they're in serial. Generally, I'm only taking off 2 to 3 dB on the peaks when they're in serial for no more than a total of about 6 dB of compression. When you've got them in parallel like this, you've got an LA2A chain, a 76 chain, and then a dry chain, you can dig in a lot deeper and still retain the dynamics. So anyway, that's a great way to do that. I will also oftentimes, if I've got drums and I've got some other channels over here, you know, bass and whatever, I might want to put them through a parallel compressor over here, and just throw one on here. On a mix bus, and again, there's no wet dry knob, but I would feed this from the overhead submix, and then you know, whatever else, the bass and whatever else I wanted to throw in there. By default, it's a post fader send, and I usually like to roll that way because then the send follows your fader moves here. You know, typically, if you're sending something to an aux send on a parallel bus, you might then route the output of the aux return as well as the output of the source channel to a submix bus, or group them together so that you've got it all in one fader. This way you don't have it on one fader. You can use a pre-fader send if you want to, and automate those separately, but I kind of like to use a post-fader send so that it follows any, you know, volume changes, and then you'll just have to adjust the threshold accordingly. But those are my favorite routing options for mixing drums or any, you know, multiple source signal in Ableton. And because of this audio effect rack grouping feature, I really, honestly, it's completely taken over my workflow, and I can't really go back to Logic or Pro Tools the same way now that I've had a little taste here. So hope that helps.